After months and years, the thrilling game of one against one was at an end. Cassidy had made the last move, and he was winner. For half a minute after the command to throw up his hands, McKay did not move. And Cassidy did not repeat the command, for he sensed the shock that had fallen upon his adversary, and was charitable enough to give him time. And then, with something like a deep sigh from between his lips, Jolly Roger's body sagged. The dunnage dropped from his shoulder to the sand. The paddle slipped from his hand. Slowly he raised his arms above his head, and Cassidy laughed softly. A few days ago McKay would have grinned back, coolly, good-humoredly, appreciative of the other's craftsmanship, even in the hour of his defeat. But today there was another soul within him. His eyes no longer saw the old Cassidy, brave and loyal to his duty, a chivalrous enemy, the man he had yearned to love as brother loves brother, even in the hours of sharpest pursuit. In Cassidy he saw now the hangman himself. The whole world had turned against him, and in this hour of his greatest despair and hopelessness, a bitter fate had turned up Cassidy to deal him the finishing blow. A swift rage burned in him, even as he raised his hands. It swept through his brain in a blinding inundation. He did not think of the law, or of death, or of freedom. It was the unfairness of the thing that filled his soul with the blackness of one last terrible desire for vengeance. Cassidy's gun, leveled at his breast, meant nothing. 1,000 guns leveled at his breast would have meant nothing. A choking sound came from his lips, and like a shot his right hand went to his revolver holster. In that last second or two Cassidy had foreseen the impending thing, and with the movement of the other's hand he cried out, "Stop! For God's sake, stop, or I shall fire!" Even into the soul of Peter there came in that moment the electrical thrill of something terrific about to happen, of impending death, of tragedy close at hand. Once, a long time ago, Peter had felt another moment such as this, when he had buried his fangs in Jed Hawkins' leg to save Nada. In that fraction of a second which carried Peter through space, Corporal Cassidy's finger was pressing the trigger of his automatic, for McKay's gun was half out of its holster. He was aiming at the other's shoulder, somewhere not to kill. The shock of Peter's assault came simultaneously with the explosion of his gun, and McKay heard the hissing spit of the bullet past his ear. His arm darted out, and as Peter buried his teeth deeper into Cassidy's leg, he heard a second shot and knew that it came from his master. There was no third. Cassidy drooped, and something like a little laugh came from him, only it was not a laugh. His body sagged, and then crumpled down so that the weight of him fell upon Peter. For many seconds after that, Jolly Roger stood with his gun in his hand, not a muscle of his body moving, and with something like stupor in his staring eyes. Peter struggled out from under Cassidy, and looked inquisitively from his master to the man who lay sprawled out like a great spider upon the sand. It was then that life seemed to come back into Jolly Roger's body. His gun fell as if it was the last thing in the world to count for anything now, and with a choking cry he ran to Cassidy and dropped upon his knees beside him. "Cassidy! Cassidy!" he cried. "Good God, I didn't mean to do it! Cassidy, old pal!" The agony in his voice stilled the growl in Peter's throat. McKay saw nothing for a space as he raised Cassidy's head and shoulders, and brushed back the mop of red hair. Everything was a blur before his eyes. He had killed Cassidy. He knew it. He had shot to kill, and not once in 100 times did he miss his mark. At last he was what the law wanted him to be, a murderer. And his victim was Cassidy, the man who had played him fairly and squarely from beginning to end, the man who had never taken a mean advantage of him, and who had died there in the white sand because he had not shot to kill. With sobbing breath he cried out his grief, and then, looking down, he saw the miracle in Cassidy's face. The Irishman's eyes were wide open, and there was pain and also a grin about his mouth. "I'm glad you're sorry," he said. "I'd hate to have a bad opinion of you, McKay. But you're a rotten shot." His body sagged heavily, and the grin slowly left his lips, and a moan came from between them. He struggled and spoke. "It may be you'll want help, McKay. If you do, there's a cabin 1/2 a mile up the creek. Saw the smoke. Heard axe. I don't blame you. You're a good sport. Pretty quick, but rotten shot. Oh, Lord, such rotten shot." And he tried vainly to grin up into Jolly Roger's face as he became a lifeless weight in the other's arms. Jolly Roger was sobbing. He was sobbing in a strange, hard man fashion as he tore open Cassidy's shirt and saw the red wound that went clean through Cassidy's right breast just under the shoulder. And Peter still heard that strange sound coming from his lips, a moaning as if for breath, as his master ran and brought up water and worked over the fallen man. And then he got under Cassidy and rose up with him on his shoulders and staggered off with him toward the creek. There he found a path, a narrow foot trail, and not once did he stop with his burden until he came into a little clearing out of which Cassidy had seen the smoke rising. In this clearing was a cabin, and from the cabin came an old man to meet him, an old man and a girl. At first something shot up into Peter's throat, for he thought it was Nada who came behind the grizzled and white-headed man. There was the same lithe slimness in her body, the same brown glint in her hair, and the same— But he saw then that it was not Nada. She was older. She was a bit taller. And her face was white when she saw the bleeding burden on Jolly Roger's back. "I shot him," panted McKay. "God knows I didn't mean to. I'm afraid—" He did not finish giving voice to the fear that Cassidy was dead, or dying, and for a moment he saw only the big staring eyes of the girl as the gray-bearded man helped him with his burden. Not until the Irishman was on a cot in the cabin did he discover how childishly weak he had become, and what a terrific struggle he had made with the weight on his shoulders. He sank into a chair while the old trapper worked over Cassidy. He heard the girl call him grandfather. She was no longer frightened, and she moved like a swift bird about the cabin, getting water and bandages and pillows, and the sight of fresh blood and of Cassidy's dead white face brought a glow of tenderness into her eyes. McKay, sitting dumbly, saw that her hands were doing twice the work his own could have accomplished, and not until he heard a low moan from the wounded man did he come to her side. "The bullet went through clean as a whistle," the old man said. "Lucky you don't use soft-nosed bullets, friend." A deep sigh came from Cassidy's lips. His eyelids fluttered, and then slowly his eyes opened. The girl was bending over him, and Cassidy saw only her face and the brown sheen of her hair. "He'll live?" Jolly Roger said tremulously. The older man remained mute. It was Cassidy, turning his head a little, who answered weakly, "Don't worry, McKay. I'll live." Jolly Roger bent over the cot, between Cassidy and the girl. Gently he took one of the wounded man's hands in both his own. "I'm sorry, old man," he whispered. "You won, fair and square, and I won't go far away. I'll be waiting for you when you get on your feet. I promise that. I'll wait." A wan smile came over Cassidy's lips,